On October 30th, 2002, during a visit to a pumpkin patch in Ohio, Stephanie Valdez experienced an unfathomable horror, one that still to this day she struggles to comprehend. There are many unexplainable occurrences in this world, and Stephanie encountered such an occurrence when something sinister chose to latch onto her and subject her to horrifying events. Events where no one and nothing seemed the same. I was in my first year at Ohio State University, and even though I was enjoying the course, the fact was that I was struggling to make friends, and that was ruining my experience. The more that I tried to open up and talk to my roommate or other people from my lectures, the more that they seemed to dislike me. My family and my friends, they were all the way back in Iowa, and I felt so alone. I remember the events of that day vividly. It was a Wednesday. I didn't have any lectures, and it was my roommate Phoebe's birthday, and she was skipping class to go to a pumpkin patch with her friends. I waited until she left the room before I placed a card and some gifts on her bed. Thinking back on it, I guess it was my sad attempt at a please like me kind of gesture. I didn't expect her to forget her purse and come back early. As she rushed into the room, she took one look at the card and the gifts on her bed, and she smiled at me and she said, "Thanks. So, you want to come to the pumpkin patch with us or what?" I froze, not knowing what to say. I think I just nodded like a crazy person, and I stared at her with eyes that people always told me were too big for my face. "Well, let's go." She beckoned me forward. "Our friend just bailed, so we have a spare ticket, and I am not scalping a Halloween ticket, but you can pay me for it later." I knew that this was such a bad idea, but I was already following her out of the building, my legs not aligning with my mind. And before I even knew what was going on, I was squashed between two strangers in the back of a rattling red Honda Civic. Phoebe introduced me to Carrie and Mitchell and her boyfriend, Brett, who was driving. All of them looked at me like I was some bad smell. I overheard Brett say to Phoebe, "What's with the bug-eyed weirdo?" But she just rolled her eyes at him and shrugged. That drive to the pumpkin patch was uncomfortable. I mean, I regretted ever buying a gift for Phoebe and forever wanting to fit in. As soon as I was there, I just wanted to leave. I tagged along to the back of the group, and I watched them smash pumpkins and flick pie at each other and make fun of people as they walked past. I mean, the more time I spent watching them, the more I realized how stupid I was for ever wanting people like them to like me. As I followed after them, I spotted someone in the distance. It was a man, and he was tall and slender, and he was dressed in all black, but with this orange glow to his skin. He seemed to be following us. At least it sure felt like that. And at first, I thought that he worked there, so he was just keeping an eye on us. But thinking back on it now, it was so weird. But weirdest of all, no one else seemed to give him much thought, just me. So as I walked through that pumpkin field, I looked behind me. There he was, about 7 rows away from me. He just had his arms at his sides, and he was just staring straight at us. No, not us. Me. It weirded me out. So when Phoebe came over to me, I looked over at that staring man and I told her he's creeping me out. I don't know if she hadn't heard me or if she just didn't care, but she just laughed and she shoved this huge pumpkin in my arms and told me to follow her. As I hurried after her, my arms straining under the pumpkin's weight, I looked back and I saw that man still standing there in the same spot, staring at me. I just tried to ignore him. I didn't know what else to do. So I caught up with the others, noticing them smirking among themselves. I knew that I was a joke to them, and I felt foolish for letting my loneliness lead me to this situation. They started walking away from me, and as I went to follow them, Brett looked back and grinning, he told me that they were going on a hayride, and I needed to watch their pumpkins. He left before I gave him an answer. When I looked around, I saw that that man had moved, but he was 5 rows away from me, staring, just staring. And I ignored that feeling in my gut that told me he was anything other than harmless. That was always my biggest problem. I was too naive. I was too trusting. I was a beacon for the darkness. To find me, I let it in. I stood there in the field, that chill air tickling at my skin and my own thoughts pecking at my mind, and I stared down at my feet and I kicked a patch of dirt. I muttered under my breath, I was such an idiot, and now a friendless idiot. When I looked up, I noticed that staring man had gone. I turned around, now my heart racing as this uneasy feeling rose inside of me, threatening to bubble over, and when I looked back, he was there, just a few rows away. I jumped back with such shock I fell over a pumpkin and I landed on more pumpkins and dirt, and both seemed to squelch around me, sucking me in. He stopped in front of me and stared down. I noticed his eyes. They had this orange tint to them that it seemed to flicker in his eyeballs as if it was almost alive. He lifted his arm out and I hesitated, thinking that he was going to help me up. So as I moved my arm to allow him, he took my hand in his and he muttered, "Sorry." And the next thing I remember is being in the field, standing in the middle of a dirt patch and surrounded by smashed, rotten pumpkins, insects festering within their fleshy insides, and the smell? So foul, I gagged into my hands. But the staring man had gone. And as I staggered across the field, I realized that everything seemed to look orange, as if it had an orange filter to it. And then I looked at my hands, and I rolled up one of my sleeves. I had the same orange glow to my skin like that man had. I stumbled across the field, following the music and laughter, and they came into view all at once. Other people. I stared at them in disbelief. Every one of them looked like something from a zombie film. Their skin was melting off their faces, falling down like melted wax. It was like the melting clock painting, but real. And not clocks, people. And their eyes. There were holes where their eyes should be. I screamed, but no one seemed to hear me. So then I rushed past the people and into the parking lot. Each person that I passed had the same melted face and gaps for eyes, and they carried on like normal. They were shoveling pumpkin pie into their mouths and posing next to the big giant pumpkin. It was as though they were oblivious to their own nightmare. It was a nightmare that only I could see. Then the orange glow, the melting faces, none of this made sense. I didn't know what else to do. So I went into the parking lot, but their red Honda Civic had gone. Phoebe and her friends had left without me. I moved in a trance now, but somehow I got a bus back to campus, accepting my new reality. I sat in a row in the middle. I was trying to stare out of the window instead of looking at the other passengers, at their melting faces and gaps, void of eyes. I was now in a living nightmare, one that had begun when that staring man had touched me. I was sure he had passed something on to me, a curse. It was this curse that I didn't know how to end. Back at campus, I walked into my room in a daze. I heard the sounds in my head. It was this clicking sound, the kind made by pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth. But whatever I did, I couldn't get that clicking to stop. I sat on my bed in my empty room, glad that Phoebe wasn't back yet. I closed my eyes and I gripped my head and I whispered, "This isn't real, this isn't real, this isn't happening." And then when I heard these creaking footsteps, I opened my eyes and the door swung open and Phoebe staggered in, the smell of stale alcohol lingering on her dress. And she looked at me, her face melting with gaps where her eyes should be, and she laughed and then fell onto her bed, and I stared at her, and I let out a silent scream. I couldn't continue seeing the world like this. This was horrific. I sat on the edge of my bed, a mixture of the clicking sound and Phoebe's drunk laughter repeating in my head. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember opening my eyes to this orange glow of morning and being at Phoebe's bedside, my hands pressing a pillow across her melted, eyeless face. I saw squirming limbs and I heard her muffled cries, but I seemed powerless to stop what I didn't even remember starting. Around me, I saw an orange glow. It seemed to outline the shape of the bed and what I was doing. I was screaming at myself, "Stop, stop." Those screams became clicks. The next thing I remember is sitting on the floor. Phoebe was laughing or screaming, I don't know which, as she gasped for breath. She shouted something at me, words claimed by the clicking inside of my head. I watched her leave the room, and then I stared at the orange glow to my skin. My thoughts were frantic, yet my legs led me over to the oval mirror, and I stared into it until I saw what I was looking for, what was looking back at me, at the orange tint that moved in the middle of my freakishly big brown eyes. I rubbed at my eyes, trying and failing to rub that orange tint out of them, trying to rid myself of the horrors that only I could see, and I kept on doing this until my eyes were achy and bloodshot. It was too much. It was all too much. I packed a bag and I decided to leave right now. I didn't know where I was going or how to stop seeing those melted, eyeless faces everywhere. I told myself all of this is happening because I'm stressed out and because I'm trying too hard to make people like me. I told myself it's fine, it's all fine. I'll go back home to my friends and family and be fine. I left through the fire escape and I walked across campus. It was raining heavy orange droplets. As I walked past the scurrying people, backpacks being used as umbrellas, I saw their faces, each one melting and with the gaps for eyes. The clicking intensified inside of my head, getting louder and louder until it was all-consuming. I gripped my head and I fell to my knees. I screamed. I couldn't stop screaming. I scratched at my own skin with such intensity that now blood was pouring out, red blood tinged orange. Yet none of the zombie people around me seemed to care. The clicking continued, growing louder and freezing me to the spot. I saw him in the distance. Brett. He didn't have a melted face, and I could see his blue eyes. He was the only normal in my nightmare vision. He saw me. He did a double take. An uneasy smirk appeared on his face. As he walked away, I stood up and I followed him. Suddenly, the melted-faced people didn't seem to matter. Only he mattered. The clicking continued, growing louder and louder in my head. He stopped walking and he looked at me and he said something about leaving me being Phoebe's idea, and he told me to chill out. And as I stared at him, this silence came over me, and I knew then, right then, what it wanted and what I must do to stop it. I reached out and I touched his hand, whispering, "Sorry." He flinched me off and started shouting, words that seemed to fade away as the orange faded from me and transferred to him. I saw his eyes widen in fear, and I knew that he was lost to it now, that whatever it was had now left me, but moved into him. I turned and I walked away. The world no longer had an orange glow to it, and that clicking had stopped. As I walked away, I felt that guilt squirming inside of me, what I had just done, at what it was that I'd just passed on to Brett. But as I walked away, I saw them, other people, and their faces no longer melted, and their eyes intact, and through my guilt, I couldn't help but sigh in relief. On October 31st, 2002, Stephanie Valdez went back home to Iowa. She later transferred to a college closer to home. She never heard from Phoebe or Brett again and remains convinced that that man at the pumpkin patch passed some sort of curse onto her. A curse she then transferred on to Brett. And over the years, she claims to have had several moments where she encountered an unsettled person with an orange glow to their skin. On seeing them, she always fled the scene as quickly as possible, adamant that she will never play host to the unexplainable curse ever again. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.